The moment my husband finally realized I knew, he didn't shout or deny it. He just stared at the folder in front of him like it might disappear if he blinked hard enough. It was a plain brown folder. Nothing dramatic. No wine thrown in his face. No screaming in a restaurant. Just bank statements, hotel receipts, screenshots, and one printed photo of him smiling in a way I hadn't seen in months. He looked at me across our kitchen island in our Melbourne townhouse, still wearing the shirt he'd ironed that morning, and said, very quietly, "How long have you known?" And that was the moment everything changed, because by then I wasn't shaking anymore. Looking back now, I realize the biggest mistake he made wasn't cheating. It was thinking my silence meant I was blind. He confused my patience with weakness. He thought because I loved him, I'd never be able to face the truth. Before I continue, I'd love to know something. Where are you watching this story from today? Tell me your city and what time it is where you are. I always love knowing where these stories reach people. If you had met us in the beginning, you would have believed in us too. I met Daniel when I was 28 at a friend's birthday dinner in South Bank. It had been one of those rare Melbourne nights where the air felt soft instead of cold, and everyone stayed out longer than they planned. He sat across from me and spent more time listening than talking, which, to be honest, is partly what drew me in. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the loudest man in the room. He was steady, thoughtful, funny in a quiet way. He walked me to my car that night and asked if he could take me out the following weekend. I remember driving home smiling like an idiot at every red light. For the first 2 years, he was the kind of man who made life feel safer. He remembered the small things, how I hated coriander, how I got anxious before family events, how I liked my tea when I couldn't sleep. When my mom had surgery, he took time off work without me even asking. When I wanted to leave my corporate job and do freelance branding full-time, he told me, "You're too talented to keep building someone else's dream." That sentence stayed with me for years. We got married in a small ceremony on the Mornington Peninsula. Nothing extravagant. Just people we loved, ocean wind, a dress I bought under budget, and a man I thought I could trust with the softest parts of me. I built my life around that trust. And I think that's the part people don't always understand when they talk about betrayal. It's not just that someone lies. It's that you organize your whole nervous system around the idea that home is safe. And then one day, it isn't. The changes didn't happen all at once. If they had, maybe I would have accepted them sooner. At first, it was just little things. Daniel started putting his phone face down on the table. Then he began taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom. He said work was intense, end of quarter pressure, a big client, late meetings. He was in finance, so it wasn't impossible. It made sense on paper, but marriage doesn't live on paper. It lives in tone, timing, eye contact, in all the tiny ways someone either stays with you or slowly leaves. He became distracted. Not cruel, exactly. That would have been easier to name. He was just elsewhere. I would be talking about my day and realize halfway through that he wasn't hearing me. He stopped reaching for me in bed. He kissed me like it was a task he didn't want to forget. On weekends, he suddenly had networking events, golf mornings, client lunches. I told myself not to be paranoid. I told myself every marriage goes through dry patches. I told myself that love sometimes sounds less like excitement and more like loyalty, but the body knows before the mind admits it. Have you ever felt something was wrong in your relationship, but ignored that feeling because loving them felt easier than facing what it might mean? One night, I made his favorite dinner. Lemon chicken, roasted potatoes, the whole thing. He texted at 7:43 saying he'd have to stay late. I ate alone, packed his portion into a container, and stood at the sink staring out into the dark courtyard with this heavy, stupid ache in my chest. When he got home after 10, he smelled like cologne and cold night air, not office air. I remember that detail because it was the first time my denial cracked. Not shattered, just cracked. Still, I said nothing. A week later, I found the first real clue by accident. He'd asked me to email a document from his laptop because his phone battery was low and he was already halfway out the door. While I was attaching the file, a notification popped up in the corner of the screen. It was just a message preview. Can't stop thinking about last night XX. This is X. No name. Just a first initial. S. S. S time. S. I froze so completely, my hand started tingling on the mouse. When he came back in, because he'd forgotten his keys, I clicked out of it so fast, I nearly knocked over my coffee. He smiled at me like nothing in the world had changed. Lifesaver, he said, taking the keys off the bench. I smiled back. That was the first performance of my life that deserved an award. I didn't sleep that night. I lay beside him listening to him breathe, staring at the ceiling, feeling like I was floating outside my own body. Part of me wanted to wake him up and demand answers. Part of me wanted to believe there was some ridiculous explanation. A coworker, a joke, anything. But something in me, maybe instinct, maybe self-protection, told me not to confront him yet. So I watched. Over the next 3 weeks, I noticed everything. The way he angled his screen away from me. The extra care he took with his appearance on casual workdays. The sudden gym membership he barely mentioned. A restaurant charge in Carlton on a night he told me he'd ordered takeaway at the office. A boutique hotel payment he explained away as a work conference deposit that somehow never appeared on the company calendar. And the worst part, he was still kind enough to make me doubt myself. Doubt, hastakena. That's what people don't talk about enough. Betrayal doesn't always come from monsters. Sometimes it comes from someone who still asks if you need milk on the way home. Before I tell you what happened next, if you enjoy stories about strength, self-respect, and people finding their way back after betrayal, take a second to subscribe and like this video. It helps me continue sharing stories like this. Anyway, by then, I had stopped looking for proof so I could accuse him. I was looking for truth so I could protect myself. I opened a bank account in my name only, not because I planned some dramatic escape, but because I realized how exposed I'd allowed myself to become. Most of my freelance income had been going into our joint account, because that's what married people do when they trust each other. I restarted work with a focus I hadn't had in months. I picked up 2 branding clients I'd nearly turned down. I updated my portfolio. I spoke to a therapist. I spoke to no one else, and for the first time since I saw that message, I did something that had nothing to do with him. I got stronger. The full truth came to me on a Thursday afternoon. Daniel had left his smartwatch charging in the bathroom. I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning toothpaste off the sink when it lit up with a message. Booked the table for Saturday. Same place as our first time? Can't wait to have you to myself. This time there was a name. Sophie. As active them as every time. Need to. I actually sat down on the bathroom floor. Not because I was surprised anymore, but because the finality of it hit me like a physical blow. There it was. No more maybe. No more overthinking. My marriage had become something I was the last to be told about. I cried for maybe 20 minutes. not loud movie crying. Just this awful, silent, shaking grief. Then I washed my face, made tea, and started thinking clearly. Saturday was our anniversary. He had told me he had to fly to Sydney for work that morning. Instead, he had booked a table with her at the restaurant, where, apparently, they had their own sentimental beginning. I remember looking at my reflection in the kettle while it boiled and thinking, so this is the version of him I married without knowing. If you discovered the person you trusted most was living a secret life, would you confront them immediately, or would you take time to understand the full truth first? I chose time. Not much, just enough. On Friday, I copied everything I had into that brown folder. I transferred my freelance income into my new account. I called a woman in St. Kilda who was subletting a furnished flat month to month. By Friday evening, I had paid the deposit. I packed one suitcase and put it in the boot of my car. Then I cooked dinner like it was any other night. He sat across from me, talking about a fake flight to Sydney, and I watched him the way you watch an actor after learning the ending of the play. Suddenly, every expression looks rehearsed. "Everything okay?" he asked at one point. I smiled. "Just tired." He nodded, relieved. That was the thing. He was always most comfortable when I asked less of him. Saturday morning, he left in a pressed navy shirt, kissed my cheek, and said, "I'll make it up to you next weekend." I said, "Safe flight." Then I waited an hour, drove to the hotel near the restaurant, and checked in using the booking confirmation that had come through on our shared travel rewards email weeks earlier. He must have forgotten that account was still linked to my phone. I didn't go to the restaurant. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to meet the other woman and turn my life into a performance for strangers. Instead, I did something simpler. I went home before he returned on Sunday, removed my clothes, my laptop, my personal files, and every sentimental thing that belonged to me. I left the wedding album on the shelf. I left his mother's serving bowl. I left the life that required me to pretend not to know. Then I waited. When he walked in that evening and saw the half-empty living room, he actually looked confused first, then irritated, then frightened. That frightened look came right before he saw the folder on the kitchen island. That brings me back to where I started. "How long have you known?" he asked. I folded my hands so he wouldn't see the tremor in them. "Long enough to stop believing you." He opened the folder. His face changed page by page. He tried once. "It's not what you think." I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was such a small sentence for such a large betrayal. "Daniel," I said, "you spent our anniversary with another woman while telling me you were on a work trip. If there's a version of that which improves with context, I'd love to hear it." He sat down heavily. "I was going to end it. Maybe," I said, "but not before letting me keep living inside the lie." He started crying then, which I hadn't expected. Real tears. Real shame, maybe. Or fear. Sometimes they look alike. "I never meant to hurt you." That sentence landed harder than his cheating somehow, because it revealed how selfish he had been all along, as if intent mattered more than impact, as if my pain was some unfortunate side effect rather than the direct cost of his choices. I told him I'd signed a short-term lease. I told him my income was no longer going into the joint account. I told him I would speak to a lawyer the next week, not because I wanted revenge, but because I finally understood that love, without respect, can turn dangerous very quietly. He stared at me and said, "So that's it?" And I remember feeling this incredible calm when I answered, "No." That was it when you started building another relationship while still sleeping in my bed. This is just the part where I stop carrying your secret for you. He expected tears. Begging. A second chance speech he could respond to. What he got was a woman who had already grieved him before he ever had to lose me. I walked out with my keys in one hand and my suitcase in the other. He didn't stop me. Maybe because he knew he had already lost the right. The strange thing about heartbreak is that people think the hardest day is the day you find out. For me, it wasn't. The hardest day was 3 weeks later, buying laundry detergent for one person and realizing I still existed outside the marriage. That sounds small, but it isn't. Starting over is built from humiliatingly ordinary moments. But here's what I learned. Your strength doesn't always arrive looking fierce. Sometimes it looks like silence while you gather yourself. Sometimes it looks like paperwork, therapy, uncomfortable truth, and choosing not to abandon yourself just because someone else did. I used to think being a good wife meant being endlessly understanding. Now I think being a whole woman means having boundaries strong enough to protect your peace. Trust is beautiful, but it should never require blindness. Love is generous, but it should never cost your self-respect. And if someone mistakes your softness for permission to break you, let them be shocked by what your quiet survival looks like. He thought I'd never find out. What he never imagined was that, once I did, I wouldn't fall apart in front of him. I would find my way back to myself.